Listen to my new Kirblog. Don't you cry no more. Hi, welcome. So as promised, this is my follow-up to the previous Kirblog that just came out this past weekend, The Curse of Being a Fictional Icon. Thank you, everybody, for your feedback. It was very helpful, and I did indeed read through all your comments for anyone who may have doubted that. So I'm calling this follow-up topic Underdog versus the Edgier alternative. This is actually the first Kirblog I think I've done in a while where I actually have an outline. I was going through a lot of the comments and kind of assembling together some of my own thoughts. And so actually this is kind of, in a way, a topic I think that I had kind of been wanting to talk about for a while. I think I have like a list of notes of like, possible Kirblog topics maybe to do someday. I had one that was just like that one cool character, how the one side character who's better than the main character supposedly should have been the main focus or whatever. So I think a lot of it, to kind of go into this sort of thesis of mine, and not balancing act, is that I think that sometimes it comes from when you get overexposed to something and you want to seek something that is an edgier alternative to what it is that you've been used to for so long. And then also the psychology of rooting for the underdog versus like the privileged, I guess you could say. I hate that word because Tumblr has kind of destroyed it for me, but that sort of mentality where like you want to root for or you identify with something that is alternative because you've been used to the way things are a certain way for a long time. Kind of going back to some of the examples that I used before, to start off with some kind of later cases. Okay, so when you think of Pokemon, everybody has, even people who don't like Pokemon have a favorite Pokemon, right? And most often I find that it's like 9 times out of 10, people's like absolute favorite Pokemon is usually not Pikachu. There are rare cases where I know of some folks who like Pikachu is genuinely their favorite. But even then, like when it comes to like the Pikachu evolutionary line, I know most people who are like, I actually like Raichu more, because like I'm so like Pikachu's so overblown or whatever. So and I'll even use myself as an example. I actually do like Pikachu a lot. Pikachu is one of my favorite characters of all time. But if I had to pick like a personal favorite Pokemon, it is Scyther, because just Scyther is the one that I always found to be really cool. But Pikachu and my liking Pikachu, I almost kind of a separate thing because like of his presence as an icon and how much more like of a general kind of presence to the world that he has. I mean, like for fuck's sake, by this point he's I think more popular than some longer lasting icons. I think that there was some list where there was proof that he might have been more popular than like Bugs Bunny and some other characters like that. But when it comes to video games too, see, that can also be kind of complicated since like with main characters, they're often intentionally crafted to be that like, maybe not always like a self-insert type of deal, but like a very simplistic personality, like a blank slate that you can kind of project yourself onto. Breath of the Wild just came out, and a lot of people are making all these jokes about like how Link is, not even jokes. I mean, it's almost practically a tradition at this point that like everybody in every Zelda game is always like super attracted to Link if that version of Link is like the adult form. I can't speak for if it's like when it's the case of Toon Link or Young Link or whatever, but when it's adult Link, he's always that everybody's just like, oh, you're so handsome or whatever, like 7 girlfriends or boyfriends, depending. Sometimes Sidon, I know, is quite popular right now. But yeah, I think that when it comes to, because when it's an interactive experience and it's supposed to be you, it's different because like I think that there is meant to be some some semblance of like you doing whatever you want to do and projecting yourself onto it, which again goes back to that same bit about what I'm sort of learning about player characters with the development of the tone game as well. And I think also that lends itself to why sometimes when they'll have like still an icon character, like when you have like Inazuma 11 is a version that I didn't is an example I didn't use. Like in that case, like Endo, the main character, is very like, I'm friends with everybody because I want to recruit everybody onto my soccer team. So it's like it fits that kind of motif of you want to make as many friends as possible to join your team, etc. Or like in the case of like Pokemon or Link, where just the character is completely doesn't say anything and just their actions are entirely whatever you make of them. When it comes to other mediums, though, like when it's a complete work that has like a full arc to it in the sense of like a film or a TV show or a novel, whatever, it's a little, or even in the case of video games where like the main character does have a finite personality. I think a lot of it comes down to it's almost like a reverse psychology. I went through so many examples. I have a bunch of ones here, including some that I didn't go over last time. A more recent one on my mind, because I'm watching it a lot, is My Hero Academia, where it's really interesting, and especially seeing what the fan response is, where, so those of you who don't know, Deku is the main character, who's this very, like, I was born without a superpower, and I want to be the world's greatest superhero and be just like my idol that I look up to. And then Bakugo is the bitter rival who is super privileged in the fact that he got his superpower really early on. He has the power of, like, explosions, so which is really hyper useful for a superhero, a badass superhero character. And he was told all his life, like, how great he is and how he's going to go so far or whatever. And then he develops this kind of sense of, like, insecurity and paranoia over everybody else, thinking that, like, everybody's kind of pitying him and, like, etc. And it's interesting because, so for me, Deku is a character that I really try to identify with a lot, in that, like he's such an uplifting, like, positive force, and yet he's so, like, wimpy and like, but, like, he works really, really hard and really tries, which, that's what I often try to see myself as. But I think I said a little bit about this when I did the Kirblog with Cliff Chapin about the show, is that I have Deku days, but I also have Bakugo days of where I'm just like, no, but I'm great, and, like, why is this not working out the way that I want it to be? Almost like a spoiled brat kind of complex or whatever, and, like, and then having that hypersensitivity and paranoia, thinking that everybody, including people who I see, like, as beneath me or whatever, are, like, like, scoffing at me or better than me or whatever like that. I have days like that. And I think that it's safe to say a lot of people have days like that, because I think that that's part of the reason why Bakugo is the most popular character in the series. On the recent character poll, he got voted to be the most popular character. Now, I don't think that that's as a result of, it's a little different than, like, the Goku Vegeta thing that I mentioned before, which I'm going to get to that next, because I think that Deku actually is a very strong protagonist. But it's interesting because, so the advantage that Deku has is that he has All Might, which is his idol character, like, backing him up and, like, giving him all these accolades, and still he's working really, really hard, but he has support. And because of the way that the story is executed, it's like you're supposed to root for him because he is the main character. But it's interesting because, again, there's sort of reverse psychology that works, maybe unintentionally, but this is how it goes sometimes. I think is almost like, like, he's working really hard and you identify with him, but in a way, like, because he's the good guy, like, he's going to continue to succeed and he's always going to, like, be flying by the seat of his pants, and somehow things will work out. And even flat out, I mean, the intro of the story is, by the way, this is the story of how I became the world's greatest superhero. So, like, by the end of the day, he is going to succeed. He's going to be the winner. And, he's going to, get everything. And, even I was joking about the last episode had a lot of focus on Ochako, one of the lead girl characters. And it's pretty obvious, like, eventually the two of them are going to be a thing in the most, like, stereotypically expected way possible, which that's a whole, the romantic side of things is a whole other thing. But sometimes that factors in as well, where, like, now I almost kind of understand why some people ship, like, Bakugo and Ochako or whatever. But it's weird because, in a way, it's like, this kind of setup can make you think that, like, the privileged character is the underdog, and the underdog character is the one who is, like, gonna win and be the the ultimate hero by the end. Which I think is also, that's why I see the value in when a main character is capable of losing. I think that it is often good that a main character has wins and losses. That was actually something, this is kind of a little side note, but the Sonic Sad AM series that I was a big fan of, mentioned a little bit of that in the Sonic Kirblog that I did with Cyberlink. One of the demands that was made, I think, between the writers when they were making that show is having the characters have wins and losses. Like, they wouldn't always come out on top every episode in this post-apocalyptic, grim kind of setting. And I really liked that. I think that that can actually be something that makes you root for the main characters more when you see them eventually have to overcome more adversity that comes across to them. It's a tricky thing to balance, and it's funny because I'm often using these shonen series as examples, because often with those kind of stories too, like, if those of you who don't know this, these artists don't always plan absolutely everything in advance. In fact, funnily enough, Toriyama, who, was one of the biggest influences on all of these guys when he was doing, when Dragon Ball was running as a comic, like weekly, he was, he was notorious and has talked about this in many interviews and things about how he, often didn't plan things ahead, super often in advance, and which I think is also the result of how a lot of things went and why, battles would turn out the way they would and why certain characters would lose and certain characters would win, which I understand why that bothers a lot of people. I think to kind of move into the Goku versus Vegeta type of thing, it's the same kind of thing where it's funny in how, like, Vegeta's whole complex comes from the fact that, like, he's an elite and Goku is, this underdog, like, clown, this low level peasant in his eyes. I just got through watching the Goku versus, like, Dark Vegeta stuff from the Majin Buu stuff. I just got a new Dragon Ball Kai box set, and I binge watched all of that the other night before recording this. So that stuff is fresh in my mind. But it's interesting in that then, Vegeta being, like, the privileged one, and also the one who's, like, he, as people often put, oh, he's a better father than Goku was, and he turns out to later be, like, a better person, which isn't necessarily true because, Goku has done a lot of stupid things, but Vegeta killed people. Like, let's not forget that, as, Piccolo firmly reminds him before he's about to sacrifice himself. And actually the Team 4-Star guys made this good point when they did their DBcember thing about how Vegeta doesn't really become a good person until he sacrifices himself to try and kill Buu. And even then it's in vain, you know what I mean? But yeah, it's that same kind of thing. And I think especially, like, from regarding that overexposure, like, and for us it's a little bit different, but I think it still applies in that you have Goku forever, right? Like, always from the beginning. And then, like, Vegeta comes in and he is the edgier alternative. And not in that way of, like, oh, Tullus is, like, evil Goku or then Goku Black or whatever. Like, he is the polar opposite to Goku in terms of, like, his upbringing and his whole style and his deal and everything, and then as he, gets to become a main character, like, more and more, and especially with Super, where he's, like, such a core focus, and has this kind of goofier side to him in a way, I think that just because it's like, oh, it's refreshing, it's different, it's nice, I like this. Actually, I'll use a different example too, because I've been talking so much about shonen stuff. But Batman versus Superman, that kind of whole, I'm sorry, not the movie. I haven't seen that. I have no interest. Sorry. But, like, with Batman versus Superman in terms of the, like, judging between the two of them. Like, I think I've said in some other Kirblog before about how I like Superman specifically when he's in Justice League and not often by himself, because when he's in Justice League and he's contrasting against all these other characters and he has the responsibility of overseeing a team, that to me makes him interesting as that kind of, infallible but finding a way for him to be fallible sort of thing. Or also even, like, I think of when he fights, I think it's Darkseid, and he has that whole, like, living in a world of cardboard speech, which I love, and then he can finally cut loose and go 100%, which is great. But you think about Batman, and even it's so funny because, like, Batman evolved into this, like, he's the alternative to Superman. He doesn't have any superpowers, and he's badass and cool and brooding, and he's not a Boy Scout like Superman or whatever. So that makes him cooler, and then a lot more people are into Batman as a result, and and they find him to be more interesting than Superman. And I think that especially in a battle between the two of them, I think more often people are going to root for Batman. But then at the same time, now we look at all these years later, I think that, you know, by no fault of their own, other than just the fact that it makes them fucking money, who can blame him? But like, Batman is like one of, if not the biggest money makers for Warner Brothers. So of course, no shit, we're gonna get the Lego Batman movie, and Lego Batman's gonna be in all the other Lego movies or whatever, probably, and fucking. You know, like all these other Batman video games, or like Injustice 2 just came out, and there's like a billion more Batman characters compared to anybody else, just like how there's always a billion more Mario characters than there are compared to any other series in like Smash Brothers. It's that kind of thing. And now people are almost kind of like, oh God, I'm so sick of Batman in a way. It comes full circle. It's so bizarre. I think one of the only examples, in fact, actually, I think that Mike Lucas pointed this out to me the other day, is, and I'm going to go back to the Shonen stuff again, but I think it's still worth, you know, using as an example, is Luffy. Luffy is consistently, even though, funnily enough, we have this character, Trafalgar Law, for those of you who are not One Piece fans, is much more like stoic, like badass, kind of cool-looking, more... I think typical anime style looking kind of character, especially for the creator of One Piece, Eiichiro Oda, who's much more cartoony with his kind of his art style and everything. He's often like a very close second place in all the character polls, you know, because he's super popular. But Luffy is always still number one, and I think the reason why is because he is in a way, he's this perfect balance of an edgier alternative / underdog / privileged thing to all shonen protagonists. Because when you think about it, so actually One Piece is a perfect example of, it was a series very heavily inspired by Dragon Ball, like, there's no mystery of that. Oda said it many times in interviews. And Luffy very much has a lot in common with Goku, but I think a lot of people often agree that Luffy is, even though he's still a very simplistic kind of guy of, I want to be king of the pirates, I like to eat, I like to hang out with my friends, I care about my friends, and I care about having adventure and fun and doing whatever I want to do. Like he's very, like, just blanket, that's Luffy in a fucking nutshell, period. But I think because of the fact that he just like doesn't give a fuck and he doesn't consider himself a hero or a good guy or a bad guy or whatever, he just enjoys life and just does whatever the fuck he wants, and anybody in his way will be promptly punched in the face. In a way, he is an edgier alternative to characters like Goku, in that he's like kind of a scamp, but he's also like positive and uplifting, but not to like an obnoxious degree. He has a lot of range to be funny and serious, you know, and also he's still an underdog, and he doesn't, you know, he wins a lot. To be fair, he does win a lot, and especially for One Piece being still relatively formulaic for what it's worth, and that it still works every time. But he will also have losses. He does have shortcomings, and he does know when, like, well, I got to run away because I know I can't take this opponent on or whatever. Like, he just works in that kind of way. So, and I know that there are a lot of other characters like that too. In fact, actually, as I'm watching Better Call Saul, I almost kind of feel like Jimmy McGill is sort of in that kind of exact, you know, sort of position of like that ambiguously gray kind of character that is really interesting and engaging to follow, and you're rooting for him even when he's not doing very good things necessarily, but like you get why, like that sort of thing. It's interesting. I think on that note, the kind of feedback that I want in this case is I would love to hear other examples from you guys on what are some other protagonists that, you know, or otherwise, that you think kind of fit that particular bill, that kind of fulfill that same, you know, role of like the quote unquote edgier alternative, or, you know, versus the underdog kind of thing, that is more interesting than the types of protagonists that I think people are more prone to ripping on kind of thing. I'd like to know some other examples if you have some, so let me know. I hope that this was cool. This was an interesting kind of experiment. I've never done like a direct follow-up Kirblog, or if I have, it's probably been a very long time. But thank you guys again very much for all the great comments. I didn't want I especially wanted to do this because I didn't want the last one to be so like, I said this in it, but I didn't want it to come off as just like a rant of just like, this annoys me, I don't like this or whatever. But I don't know, I was curious, and I thought this would be an interesting sort of experiment to sort of take up a week of of these next couple Kirbloggs in a row. The next one after this is going to be quite interesting. I recorded it a little while ago. It's a little bit of a longer one. It's actually in response to a documentary that I just watched recently called The Persistence of Vision. If any of you guys have never seen Thief and the Cobbler, look up Thief and the Cobbler Recobbled. It's one of the most visually stunning animated films of all time. And there's a really great documentary called The Persistence of Vision that you can get on Vimeo. That is absolutely worth checking out. If you want to see that, that's related to the next Kirblog topic that I already recorded. So highly recommend you check it out. Not a homework assignment in this case, but just a suggestion. It's a good movie and a good documentary about the movie. So anyway, and also don't watch Arabian Nights, for the love of God. If you've not seen that, don't watch that. Just watch Recobbled. You'll know what I mean if you look into it. Anyway, that'll do it. Leave your comments for suggestions on characters of that caliber. And also, of course, if you have suggestions for future Kirblog topics, let me know those in the comments below as well. And otherwise, I will catch you all on the next one. I hope you enjoy it. And let's dash right into June. I got a lot more work to do on this game, so wish me luck. See y'all later. Bye.